"So, how did you spend your time Friday night?" were the first words my wife Laura said when I walked into the house on Monday night. From her sarcastic tone and the fire in her eyes, I realized that the cat was out of the bag, as they say. The only way out is to tell the truth, listen to her indignation, and then move on. But I never expected that this could end our 6-year marriage. Kenny Frankson was a friend of mine from work, and although we weren't the best of friends, we got along great, and he and his fiancée Beverly visited our house several times. On Friday, Kenny had a stag party, which was held at the Fine Time Pub, owned by Sean Fenton, a friend of Kenny's since childhood. Kenny was an outgoing, popular guy and a heartthrob before meeting Bev. There were about 20 guys at the party, including my best friend Mickey, who I knew from school. The party had been going on for over an hour, and there was a lot of brotherly hugging, toasting, and bantering with the groom. At some point, a loud knock was heard at the front table where Kenny was sitting. Nick Castanos, Kenny's future best man, was trying to get everyone's attention, probably to embarrass his friend once again with another juicy story from the past. When the noise finally died down, he raised his glass and said in a loud voice, "A toast to the groom-to-be and congratulations on landing the beautiful and sexy Beverly." After everyone gave their approval, Nick remained standing on his chair with his hands raised in an attempt to calm the crowd again. He spoke through a wireless microphone, so he easily calmed the crowd of men in various stages of intoxication. With a conspiratorial grin, he continued, looking down at Kenny. "My friend, my advice to you is to enjoy your honeymoon to the fullest, because as most of us married men know, after those passionate and tumultuous 2 weeks, wives have a spiritual awakening." He paused for effect and continued, "They become nuns. Know you know this. I'm your wife, not some easy-to-get girl. If you expected me to do this, you should have married one of those bitches you were dating. And then one day you discover that your collection of back issues of Playboy magazine has disappeared and you can no longer watch the Playboy channel on your TV. Do you remember how she dragged you against your will to the mall and you found yourself looking at the busty young girl and she said, 'Isn't that a cute outfit?' Of course you were thinking, 'What outfit?' Well, Kenny, my boy, those days are over. Now, if you happen to catch an admiring glance at a sexy lady with cleavage and stiletto heels, you will hear a completely different tune. Something like, 'How can she wear that in public? She looks like she's easily accessible.' And then, to show you how a proper wife should dress, she'll spend a couple $100 more on clothes that would suit your mother better. There are two phrases that every married man should learn if he ever wants to make love again. These are the mantras of a married man, and you should start practicing them now. No, darling, and yes, darling." There was a lot of laughter and loud cheers from the crowd, but Nick raised his hands again and, raising the microphone to his lips, said, "So to celebrate Kenny's last days of freedom, I arranged for Miss Fatima to perform. Trust me, she is the girl who brought belly-to-belly dancing." Nick jumped out of his chair and, reaching for the switch behind the bar, turned on the sound system, which immediately began to play loud Oriental music. With a gesture towards the closed door next to the bar, he declared, "Here she is. After a recent tour of Las Vegas, we present to you Busty Fatima." With the click of castanets and a flurry of movements, a woman in a blue and gold costume reminiscent of "I Dream of Jeannie" appeared and began gyrating her hips to the music. As the shouts and whistles began to die down, Nick walked around with a tray handing out tequila. Even in the dim lighting, it soon became apparent that this woman was from Damascus, Ohio, not Syria. She was no more a belly dancer than the Pope was a Jew, unless the belly dancers exposed their breasts in the first 3 minutes of the show. The stacks kept coming, and the music gradually moved into a genre more associated with nightclubs. Even with the dim lighting and all the makeup she was wearing, Fatima was at least 35 years old, and she looked much better in her suit than without it, which was now obvious. She swirled and twirled and moved her hips around the tables, sometimes sitting on her knees and slapping her ample, but saggy breasts in some guys' faces. I'm sure she would have happily taken off her thong, but it was the only place to secure the rare bills her meager admirers offered her. I'm not a prude, but I'm married, and even if this woman was as hot as a gun, I wouldn't feel comfortable in this situation. I was planning an exit strategy when Miss Fatima was on my lap and pressing my face to her chest. I didn't try to touch her breasts or hold on to her wide hips. My hands were at my sides, and I was grateful that she disappeared from my lap as quickly as she had appeared. She continued to move towards the other, more supportive laps until the music died down, and she seductively walked back out the door. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw Nick follow her, presumably to pay for the entertainment. It wasn't until I saw Nick grinning as he came back and took the microphone that I realized for the first time that the situation was about to get worse. He pulled an extremely drunk Kenny out of his chair and announced, "Miss Fatima will be in the room in the back to sign autographs," he said in his most lustful voice. "Our hero of the occasion is free, but everyone else must pay $20 in cash." I noticed the crowd had thinned out as I headed out, but there were a few guys standing at the stage door waiting their turn. As I opened the door, I felt someone tap me on the shoulder, and laughing, my friend Mickey said, "Aren't you staying for an encore, Jack?" "Even if she paid me," I replied with a grin. We were parked in different directions, so instead of saying goodbye, he said, "Hey, I'll call you next week. I'd like you and Laura to meet my new friend." He winked and added, "This could be the one." Over my shoulder, I replied sarcastically, "Yeah, sure, I think I've heard that before." Looking back, I understand that I should have told Laura about the dancer, but, as they say, hindsight is strong. Now that I was faced with a very angry wife, my dilemma was, what does she know? I hope it's only about the dancer, and not about $20 pleasures. There's no point in pretending I don't know what she's talking about and looking even more guilty. I humbly said, "Sorry, honey, I should have told you about the dancer, but honestly, I didn't know it was planned until she showed up. I don't think any of us knew. It was a surprise that Nick arranged for Kenny on his own." Her face showed rage, but tears also flowed down her cheeks as she spat out the following words. "You damn pig. How could you let some cheap bitch give you pleasure, let alone pay for it?" I was so stunned and embarrassed that I lost my breath. All I thought about was how to convince her of the truth. Damn, I tried to formulate my words, but she abruptly turned away from me, and I only managed to stammer, "Laura, I swear to you, I didn't do it. I swear to God, Laura, I didn't do anything." That's all I had time to say before I heard the bedroom door slam. I didn't even try to take my toothbrush. I just lay down in my underwear in the guest room that night. The next day was Tuesday, and I woke up to the sounds of Laura cooking in the kitchen and the whispers of our two daughters, Kathleen, 2, and Carly, 3.5. I was afraid of confrontation, and, taking advantage of the fact that my wife was busy, I went into the main bathroom, took a shower, and changed clothes. When I entered the kitchen, Laura had her back to me and didn't spare me a glance, so I talked to the kids for a while, trying to relieve the tension in the room. When she finally turned to me, she had a look of disgust and hatred on her face, but she didn't say anything. I didn't know how I would do it, but I knew I needed to resolve the situation, so I called the office and took the day off. After drinking a cup of coffee, I went into the living room, where Laura turned on cartoons for the children and sat reading a magazine. When I sat down on the sofa where she was sitting, she stood up and sat in a chair on the other side of the room. "Listen, honey," I said pleadingly, "we need to talk about this. You misunderstand." "No, I don't need to talk about it, and don't call me darling, you pervert." Without looking at me, she stood up and, turning over her shoulder, said coldly, "Keep an eye on the girls. I'll go take a shower." After thinking, she turned around again and spat out, "If it weren't for the children, you would have flown out of here by now. And maybe you still will when I come to my senses." Not a single word was spoken between us for the rest of the day, and my embarrassment gradually turned into frustration and anger. I tried to look at the situation from my wife's point of view, but her refusal to even give me the opportunity to justify myself was insane. She appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner. I think most husbands think their wife is the most beautiful girl, but Laura really was. She was like the girl next door, a pretty face with regular features, short, 5'6", perky breasts and long brown hair, emerald green eyes, and a butt with legs that could stop a move. At 6'2", 210 pounds, brown hair and blue eyes, with an athletic build from playing sports in high school and college, I consider myself to be fairly average in terms of appearance. Laura gained some weight during her pregnancy with Carly and lost all but about 10 pounds, but she worked hard to keep it off. With two little girls in her arms, she didn't have the luxury of spending her days at the gym, but she did have an exercise program that she followed religiously at home. The next day, I called my friend Mickey, and after a few pleasantries, I told him my problem. Mickey was my closest friend. We knew each other since the 5th grade, when he and his family moved to our city. At school, we were in most classes together and played on the same teams. He was my best man at our wedding, and Laura loved him, despite his reputation as a ladies' man. We spoke often with Mickey and his latest flame, and he visited our home many times. Both of our daughters called him Uncle Mickey. Seeing no other choice, I agreed when he offered to come by in the evening and testify to my innocence. Despite his reputation as a ladies' man, he was also known as a straight shooter. He was a nice guy who didn't lie to his girlfriends to get them into bed. Laura knew and respected this, so if I had any chance of salvation, it was Mickey. Not wanting to catch Laura off guard, I mentioned that Mickey was coming over after dinner. She didn't object, she just pretended that she didn't hear me. When I opened the door later that evening, I led Mickey into the kitchen, where Laura was sipping her herbal tea and apparently ready for proceedings. She sat at the table with her arms crossed in front of her and a defiant grimace on her face. He accepted the cup of coffee I offered, sat down opposite Laura, and politely asked, "How are you, Laura?" She responded with an indifferent shrug. Without getting into pleasantries, he got straight to the point. "Jack told me what's going on between you two, and I'm here to set the record straight. Neither Jack nor I knew there would be a dancer at the party. In fact, no one knew except the best man. It was his little surprise for Kenny. I'm not going to lie and say she didn't walk up to tables and shake her breasts at guys, and I won't say that some men didn't get the chance to touch her. But I could swear that your husband never touched her." He was exaggerating a little, but he is still a lawyer. The other thing I can say with complete certainty is that as soon as we found out what was going on behind the scenes, Jack and I left. Laura, I have known Jack for a long time, and, besides the fact that he loves you, he is not the kind of person who would humiliate himself by engaging in any depraved acts, even if he were single. I think you know your husband well enough to know that he would never do anything to jeopardize your love or his family. Laura opened her hands, and her expression softened. I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that we had finally put this unpleasant situation behind us. She thanked him for stopping by and allowed him to kiss her on the cheek before leaving. When the door closed, she stood up and turned to me with a slight smile. However, the smile quickly turned into a grin, and in a monotone voice she said, "One lies, the other confirms." Nothing Mickey said meant anything to her, and my frustration turned to anger as I screamed, "Laura, what do you want from me? I swore on our children's lives that I didn't do this. I didn't touch her breasts. My only crime was that I was too embarrassed to stand up in front of all these guys and leave. I'm willing to take a lie detector test if that's what it takes to convince you." With the same cold expression on her face, and in the same monotone voice, she answered, "Wow, maybe you should run for president. Bill Clinton said much the same thing to millions of people. The difference is that most of these idiots believed him, but the difference is that most of these idiots believed him, and I don't believe you." For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened in our relationship. Warming. Conversations were stilted and mostly focused on or with children. She made no attempt to invite me back into our bed, and to be honest, thoughts of divorce began to cross my mind. One night about a week later, I was sleeping in the guest room when I woke up to Laura sliding into bed next to me. I immediately felt that she was naked because her breasts pressed against my hand. After almost 3 weeks of not having sex, she didn't have to make much effort before I became aroused. Other than moans and grunts, not a single word was said, and when I woke up in the morning, she was gone. I got up to use the bathroom in the hallway, and as I walked past our bedroom, I saw the door was slightly open. When I looked inside, Laura was sleeping under the covers. I realized that I was being used as a human dildo. She never said a word to me, didn't even kiss me. The next night, after we put the girls to bed, Laura surprised me by suggesting we watch a movie on TV. There was no interpersonal dialogue before or during the film, only some comments about the actors and the weak plot. Laura sat next to me, but did not snuggle as we often did. My only attempt to reach out and take her hand was met by me only as selfless permission. There was no reciprocity. I felt like our marriage was in limbo, and I was tired of the situation. After the film ended, she turned off the TV and casually stated, "Oh, by the way, I washed the sheets on your bed, but I didn't have a chance to put them in the dryer, so you can sleep in my bed if you want." I didn't miss her use of the term "my bed," but like a small child being offered a reward for good behavior, I followed her to our room. This night was an exact copy of the previous one. As I fell asleep, I thought about the words of the Bachman-Turner song Overdrive. He said, "Any love is good love." So I took what I could get. Yes, I took everything I could. But one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going to take her scraps for long. If Laura couldn't trust me, then there was no marriage. If it weren't for my child, I would have been gone a long time ago. The following Saturday, we decided to attend our friend's 10th anniversary party at the local American Legion Hall. There were many guests, including our friends and neighbors, as well as their relatives. For the occasion, Laura bought a strapless black cocktail dress and matching 4-inch pumps. The dress, although a little different from her usual conservative outfit, showed off enough cleavage and leg to look sexy without being slutty. She usually wore outfits that covered the small black and yellow butterfly tattoo on the back of her right shoulder. One night, when she was walking with her friends, she had a whim long before we met. For some reason, she regretted getting it, but I thought it was sexy. Laura was almost back to her pre-baby weight, and honestly, she looked sexy. After the buffet, the DJ, who had provided light background music throughout the dinner, turned up the volume and couples slowly began to make their way onto the dance floor. I leaned over and asked my wife if she wanted to dance, but she patted my knee and said, "Maybe after a while I'll want some more wine." To which she got up and went to the open bar without even asking me if I wanted anything. I watched her at the bar, and although I was angry, I could not help but admire her ass and shapely legs, which were emphasized by her high heels. There was a guy standing next to her waiting for her order, and while they were waiting for their drinks, I noticed he was engaging her in conversation. Both drinks arrived at the same time, and I saw him lean towards her ear so that he could be heard over the music. She smiled, placed the wine on the high table, and, placing his hand on the small of her back, they headed to the dance floor. I wasn't going to sit at the table alone like a beaten puppy, so I went to the bar and ordered a double Jameson neat. They were still dancing to Proud Mary, and Laura was shaking her butt to the music. Although she tried to keep a low profile, I saw her glance towards where I was sitting, and, noticing that I was not at the table, I looked around to see if she could find me. The next song was slow, and they stayed on the floor as he reached his hand dangerously close to her ass. What infuriated me even more was that it went off without protest. They were having an animated conversation, which had to be done mouth to ear due to the volume of the music. When her eyes finally found me, a smirk appeared on her lips. I don't know if she saw the anger in my eyes or just thought she had gone too far, but as the song ended and the next number began, I saw her smile, shake her head slightly at her partner, and walk toward her partner. Walking up to me, she asked what I was drinking, and before I could answer, she took the rest of my drink and drank it in one gulp. "Come on, honey, let's dance," she said, grabbing my hand and pulling me onto the dance floor. I'm actually pretty good on my feet, and we did 2 fast dances and stayed for a slow number. My anger quickly subsided. Laura doesn't like public displays of affection, but during the dance, she pulled me close and cuddled. When the song ended, she looked at me sexy and said in a seductive voice, "Hey, sailor, can you buy the girl a drink?" As we made our way through the dancers and reached the bar, she asked, "What have you been drinking? I'll take one of these." Being short, Laura prefers exclusively white wine and sometimes beer, but when the drinks arrived, she drank hers in 2 sips. I had only taken a few sips when she whispered in my ear, "My place is not far from here, sailor. I want to go and entertain the girl." "Show me the way, miss," I whispered back. When I turned her towards the exit, she turned around, reached for my half-empty drink, and drank it in one gulp. Halfway to our house, which was 10 minutes away, she began to pleasure me. When we arrived home, we went straight to the bedroom, without any seductive undressing of each other. I was still taking off the last sock when she pushed me onto the bed and lay on top of me. This was the first time my wife had kissed me since that Monday after the incident. I accepted my happiness without comment, expecting it to be an alcoholic anomaly, but Laura not only included it in our sexual repertoire, but became even better and more creative at it. A few nights later, I was lying in bed with the night light on when my newly uninhibited wife came out of the bathroom completely naked, another first in our relationship. She usually put on her nightgown and turned off the light before lying down with me. This night, however, she had a pure look of desire, and without a single kiss, she threw her leg over my chest and quickly moved. Sex with Laura was wonderful and got better every day. A few nights later, after the kids were asleep, we snuggled on the couch watching some sentimental movie, which seemed to excite her because she lightly caressed me. Then she said, "I've already seen this film, so I know how it ends. How about we go upstairs and make our own fun?" I wanted to ask her who she was and what she did to my wife, but I was smart enough to remain silent. Although I never doubted my wife's fidelity, I did wonder how this previously conservative woman became so proficient in bed. Over the years, our frequency of lovemaking decreased, but not the intensity. Having kids in the house limited our spontaneity a bit, but we added a few sex toys to our repertoire and enjoyed watching sexy movies. However, we never made it past the first 15 minutes on screen before we turned on each other. One of the byproducts of our passion was that Laura began to wear more seductive clothes when we went out. Not vulgar, but sensual. A little more cleavage, shorter skirts, tighter pants, and high heels that highlight her slender legs. With her new sexuality, Laura became a little bolder. Once, at a New Year's party in a crowded house, she followed me into the bathroom and we made love. We did this on a nearly deserted beach while on vacation and once in my office while the employees were busy right outside the door. It was the Saturday before my 50th birthday, and my wife had made a reservation at an expensive, upscale French restaurant. At 47, Laura looked 10 years younger, and that night she did everything she could to get my attention. I knew she would attract the attention of other men, but she looked fantastic in her new black cocktail dress, with a low back and low enough neckline to turn heads. The combination of the dress with 4-inch heels, a pearl necklace, and her long brown hair made her the epitome of elegant sexy, and I couldn't wait to show her off to everyone. We had never been to this restaurant before, and as expected, it was elegant and the dinners were great. Our young waiter positioned himself strategically behind Laura's left shoulder while taking her order, allowing him to sneak a peek at her cleavage. The waiter, who introduced himself as Morris, was no more than 25, and I even found it amusing to watch his unsuccessful attempts to be inconspicuous. The food was excellent, although a little bland for my taste. At 6'2" and 220 pounds, I prefer the larger portions, as they say. Although my wife received the occasional admiring glance from some of the diners, there were two couples sitting at the table opposite us who seemed to be several years younger than us. Although he was sitting diagonally from us, I noticed one of the men stealing glances at Laura several times. He seemed to be studying her carefully, but quickly looked away when I noticed him. This happened several times, and I finally chalked it up to Laura's charm as I continued to concentrate on the beautiful woman at our table. We only had a glass of wine with dinner and planned to go to the bar after dinner for drinks. The bar was very well appointed, with comfortable leather high chairs and a woman playing soft music on a grand piano off to the side. Having ordered B&B for Laura and cognac for myself, I excused myself and went to the toilet. When I entered the men's room, I noticed that the two men sitting across the table from us were standing at the only two urinals, so I went into a stall to relieve myself. I was thinking about how much better I could use it later in the evening when I heard one of the men say, "And are you sure it's her? How long ago was this?" "Well, I was still in med school, so that must be at least 15 years ago," another voice answered. "It's been a long time, Walter. How can you be so sure that it's her?" Followed the question. "Well, one thing's for sure, the years have been kind to her. She's still stunning. She has clearly maintained her figure, and her long brown hair is the same as when I met her. But the deciding factor is the small yellow and black butterfly tattoo on her right shoulder." This, of course, caught my attention, and although I had finished my business, I continued to stand, listening to the men wash their hands in the sink. I heard them drying their hands with paper towels as the original speaker asked, "Well, before you go back to your wives, tell me the short version." As I said, I was a student, and I went into a local bar one night to have a couple of beers and see if there was any action. I don't remember her name. I was sitting alone at the bar, and I started a conversation with her. I saw that she was wearing a wedding ring, and since she seemed several years older than me, I did not expect more. However, after a couple of glasses of wine, she began to open up and revealed that her husband had cheated on her. She told me the details, but I don't remember them, because my attention turned from simple conversation to the opportunities that the offended wife could provide. At one point, she asked if I wanted to go outside to smoke. When I told her that I don't smoke, she smiled slyly and said, "I don't smoke either." They seemed to have finished wiping their hands, but since no one else came in, the guy continued talking, and my heart was pounding in my chest. Anyway, she took my hand, and I followed her like a puppy out the door and towards her van. We started kissing, and soon my hand was under her shirt, playing with her breasts. Luckily, her car was parked away from the others, and I thought I could get laid right there. I obviously didn't have enough money for a motel in those days, so I decided to try to get what I wanted right in the parking lot. But when I tried to touch her, she pushed me away. I thought maybe I was in too much of a hurry, so we continued kissing. This is where things got a little weird. Once again, when I tried to move my hand up her thigh, she again stopped me. She seemed nervous, and I assumed that this was out of character for her behavior, so I decided that I would have to settle for just giving pleasure. We were talking at the bar, and she struck me as a nice girl, so I wasn't going to force her. To be honest, she wasn't very good at it, but as they say, there's no harm in having fun. When she finished, she looked very upset, and I thought she was going to cry. She cleaned herself up and, without looking at me, said that she needed to go home. I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. I just got out of the car, and it drove off. The other man chuckled. "I wonder if it's her husband who's with her now." "No idea. But whoever he is, he's lucky," the first one answered, and I heard them leave. I sat fully clothed on the toilet, thinking about what had happened. My wife cheated on me, but she was sure that I had cheated on her. But that was 16 years ago. We have a great marriage, amazing sex, great life. What should I do now? And then it dawned on me why Laura always refused to give me pleasure in the car. Why did she find it humiliating? It felt like I had been sitting and thinking about the situation for ages, but when I looked at my watch, a little over 10 minutes had passed. With shaky legs and no clear idea of what to do next, I headed back to the bar. Laura didn't notice me at first, but when she looked in my direction, a worried expression showed on her face. When I sat down next to her, she took my hand and, squeezing it, said, "Oh God, honey, are you okay? You've been gone for so long. You look pale. Are you feeling unwell? I already wanted to ask someone to go look for you." I didn't answer right away. I just looked into her beautiful green eyes, admired her full red lips, and looked at the seductive cleavage peeking out of her dress. At that moment, I made a decision. I took her slender hand with manicured nails and the wedding ring she had worn for 22 years. I looked at her as if I was seeing her for the first time. What's the point of making public a 16-year-old mistake that only happened once? If I tell her what I've learned, it may not destroy our marriage, but it will change our relationship forever. With this thought, I raised her hand to my lips and kissed it tenderly, looked into her sweet face again, still without saying anything. My wife smiled modestly and quietly asked with a questioning expression, "How is it?" I smiled back, kissed her hand again, and said, "I just thought, I'm lucky." Laura frowned, but then her face relaxed, and she also smiled, looking at me with warmth and tenderness, which had already seemed lost to me. We continued our evening talking and laughing, enjoying each other's company. We talked about our plans for the future, about how to raise our daughters, about a trip we had been planning for a long time, but had been putting off. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one.